His stuff here, Yerushalmi Pesachim, and the article Ozva edition was supposed to start on Lamed Tesman Alpha at the top, but we're going to start from the bottom line, Lamed Ches on the base, which even already I say, just to start from Yuhim the Sugya. And in the Vilna, that's 9 lines to the bottom line, Gimel on the base. So the Gemara says, Lishmo v'shlo lishmo shayim Rosh Hashanah. You shech the Korban Pesach the rest of the year. It's supposed to shech shlo lishmo. Shem Shlomim, Pasu Shem Oil, as we saw yesterday. But you shech the L'Shem Pesach, verbalizing that. And then you said, uh-oh. And you switched it to Shelo Lishmo. So it's very similar to the story we had previously, although we're not bringing up Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish here explicitly. It's very similar to previously, and in fact, it's going to touch on it in a moment. But in any event, so what's the status here? Right? You start off very badly, but then you try to correct yourself. So the statement we're about to see, it's very difficult to understand the way it's written here. So we're going to go with Reb Chaim's change, which is based on the Gra, which is taken from the Gra and Shkolim. So Reb said, I'm going to read first the entire statement, then go back and translate it. And this is again the Gra's Girsa. Mikayman she'amar shelo lishmo, nasa k'shoche b'shtika v'shelo lishmo v'kosher. So since it's true, he said the word mikayman here is slightly out of place, because but if you take it on the entire statement, so it makes sense. So it's like since he said shelo lishmo at the beginning, and but then he said lishmo, so then it's no different than had he shechted shtika v'shelo lishmo, and it's kosher. Okay, so shtika at the beginning was silent. You say anything, and then you realize, I have to say shelo lishmo, and you said it, you're okay. So therefore, the fact that you said shelo lishmo is no different than having started with shtika. I'm sorry, the fact that you said lishmo at the beginning is no different than having started with shtika, and therefore, it's there's like the shelo lishmo could come even later on and correct the lishmo, the silence in the beginning. So to the shelo lishmo later on can come and correct the explicit statement lishmo at the beginning. Okay, so the mikayvan means since if you started with shtika, you could correct it by saying shelo lishmo. Even if you started with an amira, which is inappropriate of the lishmo, you can also correct that with the shelo lishmo afterwards. Amar le. So now, and this is touching the previous sugya going on. So that's that was gears to change from B'chir B'Shem Shua Baraba. Now going on, Amar le v'Inkeni. If that's the case, let me read again the Gross gears again, so you have it clear. Rebun B'chir B'Shem Shua Baraba said, "Mikem Shama Shelo Lishmo." Now second Shoy B'Shtika V'Shelo Lishmo V'Kosher. Okay, so then the Gemara says on that Amar le. So he said, "Inkeni." That's the case. If you Shachlo Lishmo, is Ogdama Shelo Lishmo. Which, of course, is a whole discussion we have with Rabbi Yochanan. But evidently he didn't have the previous sugya, or he's just assuming like Rabbi Yochanan previous sugya, he's not addressing it. But he's saying, if that's the case, you should be able to say, even he was shechted lishmo. Right? And by Amma is Okdama Shel Lishmo, v'yaseg Mishav Yishoin K'shachlu Lishmo v'Shlo Lishmo. You'd be like the shechted initially Lishmo v'Shlo Lishmo. And in other words, we can come back to later thought, as because the dam lishmo on the original thought, which was lishmo, and therefore, and the word of b'shtika the gra takes out here, Reb Chaim takes out, v'yeh kosher, it's kosher as well. Okay, so the rectification should not just be even the shchita itself. He first said lishmo and then shlo lishmo, but even if in the shchita, he had in mind, right, lizok dama shel lishmo, right, that also should compact it on the shchita, and it should make it a kosher korban shari Moshe Shana. Okay, fine, Danny, but Rabbi Abba Mori, Abba said, as the korban puts it, may call it the dina kasha. Your assumption is necessarily not necessarily true. No, manamar b'shtika kosher. Who says if you start b'shtika kosher or no b'shtika apostle? Maybe you start b'shtika apostle, right? Back to carbonated. No, maybe the start b'shkita kosher. No, be makir mishum pesach. Maybe from the first moment you need an explicit akira from to remove it from the name pesach, and therefore b'shtika apostle. So therefore, you're assuming that if you verbalize shelo lishmo, and verbalize our lishmo, and it's no worse than bishtika, and therefore the shlo lishmo later on can come and uproot that and make it a kosher carbon for this place of Shai Moshe Shana, who says, maybe the moment you started, even with shtika, with stammer lishmo, it also it's possible, and there's no way of rectifying afterwards. The once it started, Shai Moshe Shana, l'shem Pesach, you're finished. That's it. It's possible. And the Gemara does not address that, does not come to any conclusion. Okay. Halacha Gimel. If you apply on this, we already referenced, right? Obviously, the Gemara previously, but here's the Mishnah about it. The Korban Beis not for the purpose of people going to eat it. The Yerushalmi not for the purpose of people subscribed on it. Although we haven't had it yet in the Masechta, but you have to subscribe to Korban Pesach. La Reilim, the people are not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. L'Tmeim, also not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. Puzzle. So that's, you can put a shechit exclusively for them. L'Ochlav v'Shalochlav, if you had in mind both for Ochlim and Shalochlav. L'Mulim Shalomim for subscribers and not for subscribers. L'Mulim La'aleim, L'Tmeim L'Tarim for both Mulim and Arelim, people who have bris milah, people who didn't have bris milah. L'Tmeim L'Tarim for both people Tam and people Tahar. Kosher. It's kosher. Shachted chatzos possible. Shachted before chatzos is possible. Shneimar bo bein arbaim, says in arbaim, which we discussed a few days ago, means in the afternoon. Kolam tamid kosher, but if you shachted before the kolam tamid, we also mentioned this before. It's kosher. But sheheh echad memareis b'damo. But there's a caveat. Somebody has to be mixing the blood that it shouldn't congeal, and it should not be sprinkled on the mizbeach until the blood of tamid is sprinkled first. But says where, yeah, but that's only a chatchila. As a Mishnah, sorry, that's only a chatchila. Nizak kosher, but the avid if it's sprinkled before the damatome, that's also good. The Gemara explains, Africa you char davar shenemar bo kivo hashemesh ubein arbaim. That since there's kivo hashemesh should be later on. Now it seems like it's later. Tummy the mitzvah. That's the chatchila. Avalo mitzvah doesn't become possible that way. Okay, says the Gemara. How do you know it's supposed to shech the Korban Pesach for its eaters? People who can eat it, not people who can't eat it, because whatever reason. Rabbi Yochanan Shmuel said, "Ish lefi achlo tachosu." So it says the Korban Pesach. This excludes the person who's sick and therefore can't eat, an elderly person therefore can't eat, and an orel is not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. Even if they're menuing the Korban, they're not lefi achlo, and therefore you can't check for them. So tachosu seems to mean to cover, right? But Rabbi Yosher said lashon sursi, said this is actually an Aramaic word in the Chumash. Like a person has his friend, kosi is atzleha, because kos is a lashon of shchita in Aramaic. So it's like a person who says to his friend, slaughter me this sheep. So here we have Aramaic in the Torah, and it's the chosu means to shecht. You have to shecht for the purpose of the ochlim. The art school here engages a little bit of mechkar. He says lashon sursi is a lashon of Aramaic that they speak in Syria, which is slightly different than Aramaic they spoke in Bavel. That's the Pnei Moshe, based on Rashi, and somewhere else Rashi writes that sursi is the lashon of the dialect of Aramaic, which is in Talmud Yerushalmi. I remember somewhere that, and I don't remember from where. I don't see it brought down here, so I don't remember where exactly it's from. That Sursi is actually a language of distorted. In other words, Aramaic is like, Saresa Samika Vidarsheu, it's on the self-conversion of Sirus, and means that Aramaic is a distorted form of Hebrew. I don't remember where I got that from. Okay, so Mark says, Kate and Shalom Ochlav. What is case of Shalom Ochlav? Like of course, later we said before, Shachlu Shem Chol Shem Zakin Shem Yecholim Ochel Gzais. Shachlu for Chol Zakin, which can't eat Gzais. So Korban so through an Orel, which is not comparable because he's not allowed to eat, but these are people who can't eat. Kate and Shalom Muyab. What's the Shalom Muyab? The non-subscribers. Shachlu Shem Chab Chabura Cheres. So this you shechted for people who are not members of this chabura, who got together by this Korban Pesach, but are members of another chabura. Okay, line Farshim changed the next line in the Gemara, but we're going to go with the Yerushalmi and the Kanievsky and also the Art Scroll, who do not actually change the line. The Yerushalmi is the Shaprat and Glein Ephraim. Hadamara, so the Shakot Yesh Lamin leaf soul. Since we pass the Zaken, right? Even though it's suitable to eat, right? Because he cannot eat, and it's if you shecht it for chabura is all kanim, right? Who can't eat a kazayas, they're going to be possible even though they're menuim. So the same thing is true about a katan. That if you have a katan who can't eat kazayas and you made him, you shechted, he was a money, and he can't eat a kazayas, so it also applies to the korban, right? It's true about katan as well. Even though, I guess it's why is the katan greater chiddush than zaken? That's why a lot of people change gears here, because it's the bigger chiddush by katan than by zaken. So, but it could be, katan. It could be cool. So after some point in the future, maybe he tried harder, he could eat it. In any event, we infer the katan. That's not the biggest chiddush. The biggest chiddush, the next line. This hadamar again. Hadamar shakatan yeshumim. So hadamar haynosim derech l'choika. If somebody was capable of eating kazayas, but he's far away, and therefore he's not able to eat the kazayas, because outside the Yerushalmi. The shechted you shechted for him. In other words, he was money on the korban, but he's outside Yerushalmi, and you had a chabura of all these people who are outside Yerushalmi, right? You shechted for them, right, for the purpose of these people outside Yerushalmi. So then it's the korban based on his puzzle. That's the lochov. They can't eat it, not because they cannot eat, but because they're not present here in the proper place to eat it. Okay, so it's not the incapacity to eat intrinsically, but that even the circumstances prevent the person from eating. That in of itself is considered a problem shelo lochov. That's the Yerushalmi Pesachim. So the fact that they're not present still means they're considered to be potentially ochlim, and therefore the Bible to shech them is shalochim. Hadam amara, hadam isayah lejume. The words hadam amara a little bit difficult here. Could be they're just here because of the they come up in the next line as well. But the Karmei says damra shmamina siu lejumya. From here, that's already the next word stated too. Hadamra hadam isayah lejume. This is a right for the sheet of the drumming. The drumming say imuin she'avdu. If you have in terms of pigul, right? You had in mind to putting the imurin at the wrong time, but these imurin were lost, right? They can't find them; they're gone somehow. So nevertheless, they even like Thurston was Damakiv, right? If you never found them, the korban still be kosher because it is because Adam Kedin. But think about like Thurston Mishlu Chutz is Manachutzim Koyim apostles the korban, right? So now, what about you have Murim Shavdu? And you thought of Machshavas about the Murim Shavdu, Chutzis to bring them Chutzis Manachutzim Koyim. Doesn't matter. Mechashin Kamishin Kayamin. It's as if they exist. They're no different than these Shalol Ochav outside Yerushalayim, right? Because they can't. So it's still. They're considered to be part and parts of the korban, even though they can't. They're as if they're lost because they're outside Yerushalayim. They're considered to be part of the ochlim, and therefore, if you had them in mind, they're part of the korban, right? So they're again, if it's only shlo ochlav, you only had them in mind. But in any event here too, so that's a riot to the Jumi. You say if you had the Murim in mind to put in the wrong, put them in the wrong time and place, even though they're not around, you can't find them. Nevertheless. It's still possible the korban. Very fascinating. You showing me hyperlink there. Okay, the next line in the Gemara, there are many different interpretations of what's going on. It starts Adam Ara, and if you take Pshuto, it's going back on the Bryce, which we just brought down, but case the Shlol Ochlav, but case Shlol Minuyav. But in any event, it seems like it's actually going on in the Mishnah. The Arts Code says going in the Brisa, and Chaim Kanievsky changes the word at the end of the sentence from puzzle to kosher. We're going to just go with the Girsa in front of us, and we're going to, and I think it's going to part of the Mishnah that says Shachta limnuyav v'shelo limnuyav. you shechted for the menuyim and shaloim nuyav. And the question was about to ask, what if you shechted only for half the menuyim? Okay, because menuyim sounds like you shechted for all the menuyim, and you started shechted for other people who are not money as well, right? But what if you shechted only part of the menuyim and not for all the menuyim? What's the status then? Okay, so again, our Mishnah said much of that shechted for all the menuyim. You shechted for other people, that's okay. But even shechted for part of the menuyim, and you shechted for all the menuyim, what's the status then? Adam Mara, the teacher us, shechted shetachem chatzi chaburaso. If you shechted only the half of the chabur sheet, it should be possible, right? Because it seems our Mishnah you have to shech for all the menuyim, and if you shech for all the menuyim plus, that's okay. If you shech for half of the chabur, it should be possible. So Chagai says no, you can't be that from Mishnah because our Mishnah is going to tell us a different chiddush, a very radical chiddush actually. Amar Chagai kum Rabbi Yossi, he brought the shulchan cholin. Of course, you shech for part of the menuyim, that's fine. So why did our Mishnah why the Mishnah take a case where you shechted for all the menuyim and for other people, right? Say if shechted for part of the menuyim, it's also kosher. So he's saying our Mishnah about a case where all the people in the chabur are sick. And that's why you shechted for other people, not in the chabura, because you said, okay, I can't shech for the chabura, for the people, just to be the chabura, because they're all sick. Nobody's going to eat. I got to include other people as well, and that way that's going to remedy the problem that we don't have eaters. We get eaters from elsewhere, right? So I'm shechting for the menuyim, I'm shechting for ochlim. They're not the same people. The menuyim can't eat; they're cholim. I'm shechting also for other people. They're not menuyim, but they can be all ochel. And that the Mishnah is saying that's kosher, but not because evidently not because the other people can eat from it, but rather in a case where later on it comes out that those cholim get healed and they can't eat from it. So therefore that's okay. Therefore that's okay. So it could be that the cholim, the fact that they're cholim, I might have thought would at the time of the shechita would passel because the menuyim are not the oichlim and the oichlim are not the menuyim. So therefore the chiddush is that if later on they become healed and they can't from eat the ariyot sukkar and Pesach, the Mishnah is not going to tell you that the other people you shechted for are the ones who make it kosher. It's the cholim themselves who later become healed that they can eat from it. So Amar Lei, Rabbi Yossi said, if that's the case, if the Mishnah is going to tell us that chiddush, that even you shechted for cholim, if they come healed later on, it's okay. Amar Lei nista shem the shechted. The afternoon they were indigestion. They got and they couldn't eat, but by the nightfall they're able to eat. But that's the case. Let the Mishnah say nista shem nechabur psulin. The Shach suggests you should change it to cholim. It's the same principle. In other words, to say that he was shechted shem psulin, but later on, the only apostle temporarily, and later on they're going to become kosher. That's okay. Right? That's what the Mishnah should say. So Gemara answers. Amalei says, "B'shayu sham sherim b'shachlu shem sulim." Fascinating answer. He says, even there, though some of the chabur was really kosher, and as long as you shechted also for the psulim, and as a result, you want to shecht also for shalom nuyim because you're afraid that there are not enough ochlim because some of them are kosher, some of them are apostle, right? So that's what I might say it's apostle. So that's the Mishnah's comment. It's not apostle. Okay, so even though some of them are kosher, some of them are apostle, right? And you're shechting for other people in order to cover the apostle people. So therefore, that's also okay. And it's not a question of the temporary psul that people can't eat now, but it's a question of whether the question of whether the shalom nuyav, because you want to cover people who can't eat in the right now, the korban, does that make it? Is that issue not an issue? So it's interesting in a shas here. The shas here says, the ayin Rambam halach gimel u'v'kes mishasham choyamakom l'man mikan yotzel farish the ochlev shlo ochlev kosher that which ochlav is kosher and shekimen l'shneim, as he had in mind both. I'm a shach l'shem sulim. If you just share the purpose of sulim, avshu gam ksherim b'minuyav, even though they're also papka ksherim were among the minuyim, possible, right? Okay, so then he says Lashon Rambam there is not so, it's perhaps not much that way, but in any event, so that's a fascinating thing here, that the Rambam passes like the Yerushalmi. It seems the Rambam passes Yerushalmi that if you had ksherim and psulim, and you shechted just for the psulim, and for the shalom and miluyim, a tak would be possible, right? According to Maskonos Yerushalmi. Right, the taka. It sounds like psulim. In other words, that you have to the shech only the psulim, even the ksherim there, it's no good, because our Mishnah which says is kosher. It's only talking about whether ksherim and psulim and you shechted for both them and also shalom nuyev. But you shechted just for the psulim and shalom nuyev, even though the ksherim only on the korban, that would not be good. And then this Rabbi Lezer now comes to explain. Rabbi Lezer said, Masnisa, our Mishnah, is which says that if it's it's not going to the million part, but going to the Ochlim part, which is the same principle. The question. Masisa b'shachtel ochlav, he shechted for the there were ochlim and ochlim. So our mission is when you shechted l'ochlav, and then you skap l'ochlav v'shlo l'ochlav. Then the skap here, according to the Mashbiach, according to Shana Kupshuta, according to others, not necessarily according to the Korban Eda, but according to the other achronim, this skap here doesn't mean the zrikas adam. It means the eating. Okay, it's borrowed terminology like we often find in Yerushalmi. So masnisa b'shachtel l'ochlav, you shechted for the ochlim. The skaper bone, they ate it. The shloch got healed and they ate it. They were able to eat, or even they ate less than a kazayas, wherever they were able to eat. That's fine. And here there's a word missing, obviously. The shachtim mishon only shalol ochlav. The shachtim just for the shalol ochlim. And you might have tried to fix that by adding on other menuyim as well. Okay, which is what we're discussing until now. So we are going back also that line as well. But you only shechted, despite the fact that there are ochlim also in the chabura. Right? Like the Rambam says, there are ochlim in the chabura, but you shechted, don't ask me why, you shechted shlo ochlev. And you add a menuyim from elsewhere, it could be, right? But it doesn't matter. Even later on, these kapel ochlev, shlo ochlev, later on, even the ochlim ate it. It's still possible, because when you shechted, you had in mind only the cholim, the psulim, and either you added other menuyim, that you added them, but it's shalom menuyav. Sorry, you added shalom menuyav, doesn't help. Okay, you have to have in mind the chatchila for those people who are able to eat, who are part of the chabura. Okay, that was a pretty difficult sugya, and there are many other interpretations we said in it, but it's. That's one interpretation at least, and we're going to go on to the next part. The Gemara goes on and says, Rabbi Shimloi asked Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Shimloi came to Rabbi Yonasan, Amarle, Elfen Agada. Teach me Agadata. So normally we think that to learn Agadata is less restrictive than learning Gemara. No. Amarle Masoras Miyadi Me'avoisa, I have Masora from in my hands from my forefathers. Shlola made Agadata. Agada, Lulabavli, not to somebody from Babylon. Lulajomi, know somebody from the south. Normally it's the area around Lud. It's called the south. The Zikne Dorom. It's come from down there. Shengasi Ruach, they are haughty in spirit. Mute Torah. Vatmi Nardoi, and you are from Nardoa, from Bavel. Vidar B'Dorom, and you live in the south. So you have two strikes against you. There is interesting girsa in the Sefer Chasidim, which is V'od Shata Katan. I think it's the language. V'od Katan. Yes, you're. Besides that, you're too young. So a triple whammy. The Bavel live in the south, and you're young. Okay, Amalei Chaim Milsa. He said, "Fine. Okay, you can teach me Agadata. Tell me something about this over here. Ma ben lishmo v'shlo lishmo." What's the difference between somebody who shechs lishmo v'shlo lishmo that the Korban Pesach v'shlo lishmo that it's possible, and somebody who shechs l'ochla v'shlo l'ochla that it's kosher? Good question. Not I got it the question, but a good question. We gave pretty good alumnish answers here. Amar lishmo v'shlo lishmo b'sula beguf migufo. Shlo lishmo lishmo it's a b'sula lechefza. Right in the korban, right? The puzzle is in the gavra. It's in the other people, right? It's not in the korban. So therefore, once the psul is in the korban, that's a problem. Once it's in the people, that's not a problem. I'm not sure necessarily this is a separate answer. The next answer, but it could be it's just an elaboration of the first answer. Lishmo v'shlo lishmo. If you did lishmo v'shlo lishmo, and yochol avur psulim b'toch hasher, you can't say this is the puzzle part. That's the kosher part. You can say these are the kosher, these are the apostle. Okay, so I think that's connected to Chefza Gavra. It's an elaboration thereof. But Lishmo Shalishmo Noi B'chol Koder. This is sounds to the fact that the next answer is a separate answer. That is also a separate answer. So then, personally, Gavra Chefza, and this is a new concept of Barer that they can isolate, not isolate. Anyway, they're both very lumdish. Lishmo Shalishmo Noi B'chol Kodshim. Besides that, Lishmo Shalishmo is a psul in all Kodshim. Not dafka all Kodshim, but the Korban says all Chatchila Tzarech L'Shachton Lishmon. But it could mean it's other Kodshim, not just not all Kodshim Chatchila, but other Kodshim, which are the Chatos, which is Mishech Lishma. So it has a separate application. Reb Chaim says, by other korbanos, it's even though Shlo Lishmo doesn't pass it makes it if it won't. Depending what the thought is, I guess it's not going to be oil balam m'shem choiva. But then he brings in also this idea that the reference is chatos. Pesach, so it's unique to Pesach, so therefore it's unique psul. Therefore, it's limited in its application as well. Rabbi Yosef say Minanot Dod Rabbi Lezer at Shama Tarte says the Korban Eda the at Shama Tarte from that which I said you hear two things Shamina the Leisa Trei Chilukim Shechiluk Rabbi Yonasan. Two of the Chilukim these Lomdish Chiluk Yonasan gave are not applicable. There's a Gilsa here at Shamat Tarte. Remember it has that Gilsa, but it means you got to remove two. Okay, no, maybe it's just a conjecture with the Yerushalmi Pesachim that brings down. I thought it was actually a girsa. Okay, so change the Shomat to Shomat is not, however, it's not such a big leap. The Mari Blazer said Masnisa. Mishnah is b'sheshachto l'ochlav. We had this a few moments ago. Shachto l'ochlav, niskarpo l'ochlav, v'shlo l'ochlav. Right, what we said in our Mishnah is talking about we shechted for the ochlim, and then you were in this. It was eaten by the ochlim and by the non-ochlim. Again, as he said earlier, only for the low ochlim, even though for the people can't eat. Even despite the fact that other menuyim on it, so and later on they ate from it both the kshem and sulim. It's puzzle, so it's no good. Now here, in this case, says Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi says, that you have two of the chilukim. Rabbi Lezer should apply. Right? The proposal is on account of the people around it, the gavron, not the chevtza. Also, you can select out the people who are apostle. Although in this case you'd be left with nobody. But in any event, you can demonstrate who's apostle, and I guess there would be astonished shechter for the other people. But nevertheless, he says it's no good. So therefore, both these differences should apply. In this case, should be kosher. Elkani. So therefore, we're left only with that last chiluk. Lishmo v'shleishmo noibachol kodshim loch l'shlochlav eino noeg ela bepesach. That the difference between lishmo being a more universal psul than the l'shlochlav. Rabbi Yovan Isla Chayri. I got a little chilukim I can make. There are a bunch of them, but some of them come on the next Amud. So, and we got to the bottom of the Amud. So we'll just do just the first one now. Lishmo v'shlo lishmo noy b'chol avodos. Lishmo v'shlo lishmo is an issue by all avodos. So do any of the avodos for avodos shlo lishmo, it passes. It's going to pass the korban. But lochel v'shlochav ain't noig el b'shchita. It's only an issue by shchita, as it says ish lefi achlo tachusu. So we got it to the top of Daf Mem, actually in the Vilna, it's mamish the bottom of Lamed Daled Lamed Beis, so it's a good place to stop. Actually, before I conclude, let me make correct an error here. He only gives one chiluk. That's the end of the chilukim. Now the Gemara goes on to something else. So actually, that's the end of that sequence with this chiluk of period, full stop. And then we're going to go on to new issues.